that's our new Caldwell Brass Catcher. And it's such a simple install. You just take the Velcro band here, attach it to the fore end, just kind of position this thing over the opening where these pieces of brass are ejected. And so far, it hasn't missed a one. We fired a number of rounds today, and it's working slick. About $10 from Midway, USA. Now, another thing that I want to accomplish today is we're going to be looking at some of the new loads that I'm working up. If you watched our previous video, I've got two separate loads using 40 grain bullets. That's the Nosler Varmageddon and the Barnes Varminator. And I got another two loads with 69 grain bullets. That's the Sierra Tipped Match Kings and the Barnes Match Burners. I'm working up that load using Varget powder. We'll start using the 40 grain bullets, working up that load. And that's the reason why I got this Caldwell Brass Catcher. I'm going to empty this thing out right now. Just unzips from the bottom here. And then as each round, each case is ejected, I'm going to open it up and I'm going to take a look at it. I'm going to be watching that primer for any signs of pressure. That tells me I need to back off. Now, I'm not expecting any problems with my 40 grain bullets, but my 69s, they started getting compressed very early on. And I got to watch those things really closely to make sure I don't have any pressure problems. I've got my Ehler Model 33 chronograph, and we're going to use it as well to watch for any pressure spikes, which would be indicated by abnormal velocity. So we're going to get this thing set up and start shooting. Perfect. Well, we're back in from the range, and first thing, everything shot just fine. Absolutely safe, no signs of pressure on those primers, no problems with any sort of extraction or anything like that, and so that's a good thing. Now, one of the most interesting things that I noticed happened when I was firing the 25.6 grain powder charges for both of those 40 grain bullets. This happened in both the Nosler Varmageddon and the Barnes Varminator. And that was that we had a spike, a slight spike in velocities. Now when I fired the following round, it dropped back down. Now what does that mean? Was it a pressure problem? Well, not really, because that pressure's dropped right back. However, if we had that pressure spike followed by a reduction in velocities on the next, and we're seeing some sort of pressure signs on the primers, then that's definitely an indication that we've got some pressure problems building up. And what's happening oftentimes in that situation, that the primers are starting to back out, and actually you're probably releasing some of that gas rearward through the primer. Now we didn't see that. We would have had like a sort of a blown primer. You would have seen some discoloration, if you want to call it that, on the head of the case, right around by the head stamp. But we didn't see that. Now when we look at the graph of the velocities that we got with those 40 grain bullets. What we're looking for is the line between two rounds. We're watching for that line to be as flat as possible. And what that allows us to do is to choose the powder charge immediately between those two charges that produced a relatively flat line and load that in the future. So for our 40 grain bullets, I'm choosing a 25.3 grain powder charge. And we're going to load that 10 rounds in both the Barnes Varminators and the Nosler Varmageddons. And we're going to kind of put those head to head and check again. We're going to watch for velocities and the uniformity, consistency of those muzzle velocities. And we're going to see how each of those different bullets performs on paper. Now let's look at those 69 grain bullets. I fired only 3 of each of those bullets, Sierra tipped Match Kings and Barnes Match Burners. Again, no signs of any sort of pressure, no pressure problems were indicated. And then when we look at the graph of those velocities and look for a flat line, we don't see quite as good of a flat line as we did with the Nosler Varmageddon between the 25.2 and the 25.4 grain powder charges. But we definitely see a better flat line being indicated between the 24.2 and 24.4 powder charges. In fact, for the Barnes bullets, there was only 10 feet per second difference in muzzle velocities, and that's a good sign. So for these 69 grain bullets, I'm going to be using 24.3 grains of powder, Varget, once again. I'm going to load 10 of the Sierra tipped Match Kings, and I'm going to load 10 of the Barnes Match Burners. Now, which one's going to become my final load? Is it going to be a 40 grain? Is it going to be a 69 grain? Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to experiment and test out the 69 grain bullet has to do with its differences in trajectories, exterior ballistics. So let's take a look at that. You'll see that at the muzzle, these 40 grain bullets have nearly 200 feet per second additional velocity relative to or compared to the 69 grain bullets. However, once we get to 100 yards, just 100 yards away, the 69 grain bullets have already exceeded the muzzle velocity of those 40 grain bullets. Those 40 grain bullets more or less just drop like a rock out at range. In fact, if we look at 500 yards, we see that the 40 grain bullet is going transonic already, whereas the 69 grain bullet is still well into the supersonic range of the velocities. We have nearly triple the energy using a 69 grain bullet and almost 20 inches less drop in its trajectory. The 69 grain bullet doesn't even go transonic until we're about somewhere 750, maybe 775 yards. Now that's an awfully long shot with a 5.56 or 2.23. And at that range, 800 yards, the trajectory of the 69 grain bullet shows a drop of 31 MOA relative to a 48 MOA drop by that little 40 grain bullet. Right now, those 69 grain bullets give us no indication that they're not going to perform well. So I'm really excited to see how this is going to turn out. I hope you join me on the next episode of Extreme Reloading, where we're going to put all this to the test. Thanks for watching.